Good afternoon and welcome to our October 22nd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. It's nice to see everyone and I hope you had a chance to enjoy this lovely fall weather. I'll now call this meeting to order. Are there any declarations from members of Council? Councillor Johns, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Declaring conflict of interest on item L2 as it relates to the downtown revitalization in Mount Albert, as I previously declared, and so just once again redeclaring that interest. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any others at this time. Seeing none, I will share the land acknowledgement. The town of East Gwillimbury recognizes and acknowledges the lands originally used and occupied by the First Peoples of the Williams Treaty First Nations and other Indigenous peoples, and on behalf of Council, I thank them for sharing this land. We also acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as East Gwillimbury's closest First Nation community and recognize the unique relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and the waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and we join them in these responsibilities. We're at item D in our agenda, and that's community announcements. Would there be members of Council who would have a community announcement? Councillor, hey, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to extend congratulations again after the unveiling ceremony this morning of Holding Hope in Sharon in the Children of Peace Park. I want to recognize the chair, Jeanette Champ, and the core group of the Accessibility Advisory Committee members, which include Bev and Michael and George, who unfortunately couldn't join the unveiling ceremony this morning. So a heartfelt thank you as council liaison for their years of hard work bringing that idea to fruition. So congratulations to them, and I encourage everybody to go and take a look at the park, at the beautiful sculpture that's been created for the town. And I would also like to announce that on Saturday, November the 2nd, from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m., the Hollyberries Artisan Christmas Show will be taking place at the Holland Landing Community Centre, and it is in fact Bev, who's on the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, who annually organizes this event, and all of the funds raised go to the Holland Landing Lions Club. So she's a great contributor to the community. So we look forward to that show. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other community announcements at this time? Seeing none? Oh, sorry, Councillor, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted, Councillor Leahy, I think you said the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I think you meant the Arts and Culture
Oh,
Advisory
sorry, yes, I absolutely did mean the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. I think the heat of the day is
Thank you. Just wanted to comment that the Library Board and the library staff and the Friends of the Library had another very successful used book sale on the weekend. It's Public Libraries Week. It is, Public Libraries Month, but it's also Public Libraries Week. It is, in addition to that, also Small Business Week. And so I wanted to acknowledge some of the activities that our own staff in economic development are doing to acknowledge that, as well as that of the Chamber of Commerce, who are also recognizing it. So I just wanted to put a shout out to those two causes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any others at this time. Move to item D, and that's deputations. There are no deputations on the agenda. I will move to item F, and that's presentations. And we do not have any presentations on the agenda at this time. We'll now move to the Mayor's 2025 budget. And we'll get started with that. Good afternoon. Before we hear from our CAO and the General Manager of Finance, I'd like to say a few words about the budget presentation today. In September, when Mr. Marshall introduced the process for 2025, I confirmed that while there were some changes streaming from the strong mayor's legislation, there wouldn't be a substantive changes to the way we work together. I'm pleased to share that we have continued to follow a standard process which, while honoring our traditions of collaboration and respect. Thank you to Council and staff for advancing this work thoughtfully and professionally to date. Today, Mr. Marshall will provide a high-level preview of the budget, which I will be working with staff to table at the beginning of November. The budget reflects consultation, research, input from residents, and staff expertise. It also reflects the business plan and guiding principles that Council endorsed earlier this year. Providing, I've lost my place here. Sorry, I am. Providing direction to staff on the budget is one of the most important acts for elected officials. I take this seriously, as do all members of council. The budget sets the priorities for programs, services, and infrastructure residents need and expect. I'm proud of the collaborative efforts that bring us to this point and welcome the opportunity for dialogue when the budget is officially tabled. I'd now like to pass over to CAO Mark Velchek for his comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of brief comments before I turn it over to our treasurer. As you mentioned, just for council's awareness and more so for the public, the budget process actually started months ago when staff undertake to start to review, analyze, consider not only community needs, compare services, seek input from council, residents, and also look at trend data in terms of, you know, what we've seen in terms of past trends that can help inform best use of resources for the next year. And when the 2025 budget is tabled, it is going to reflect the business plan that was presented to council in September. And just as a reminder, that plan is rooted in supporting the council-approved strategic plan. So we very much are guided by those key planning documents. And you will recall that it was just last year when we first sort of modified our process to some degree to actually have a business planning discussion in advance of the budget, or as I call it, the resource plan. So today, Mr. Marshall and his team are going to provide a high-level preview of that proposed 2025 budget that we're continuing to work with you, Madam Mayor, that you referenced will be tabled in November. And it is going to reflect the guiding principles that Council endorsed in September, because as you recall, there were a number of guiding principles that the Treasurer put before you upon which he would develop the resourcing plan, and we're going to make sure that, in fact, whatever is proposed aligns with those. So we really do appreciate that guidance and input from Council along the way to date. Among those principles, one of them that's probably most notable is that East Gwillimbury maintain its status as the lowest relative taxed municipality amongst York Region municipalities. We're very proud of that. We work hard to make sure that's the case, and that will continue to be the case. We're also committed, and this is really important, because some municipalities at the end of the year will talk about sharpening pencils and, you know, how about we try and find some efficiencies and so on. We're one of the few municipalities, we may be the only, quite frankly, that establishes an in-year savings target. And so we are committed to continuous improvement 12 months of the year. We don't reserve that for one time of the year for some select announcements. We're working on that daily, weekly, monthly, and throughout the year. And I can tell you the team prides itself in ensuring that we're delivering the very best value for money. So fiscal responsibility is important. And in that regard, we also look to leverage other opportunities for funding to take pressure off the taxpayers. And that might be other fees or other levels of government in terms of grant opportunities and so on. And so we continue to have a focus on looking for any of those opportunities as we move through the balance of 2024 and into 2025. And also, just as a little bit of a reminder, there was a period, certainly as we went through a tough period in 2021 and 2022 and dealing with COVID and the global pandemic, where we had a couple of years where in fact we had 0% changes in tax levy. But just at the same time, the cost of delivering our programs and services continue to climb, and so that's offered a challenge that we need to address. And just like yourself, Mayor Hackson, I just want to express my appreciation to the members of council and to staff for the collaborative mindset and effort that's been put in to date. And I'm looking forward to November and the public deliberation process. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will turn it over to our Treasurer, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, CEO Velchich. Madam Mayor, members of committee, I'm joined today by our Director of Finance and Deputy Treasurer Valerie Adema and our Director of Capital and Development Finance, Carolyn Brown, and we're here to provide you with a preview of the 2025 budget. Sorry, you can go to the next slide, please. So in this presentation today, we're going to be providing you with an overview of where we are in the business plan and budget process, and to give you some highlights regarding the 4 components of the 2025 budget. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of the town's strategic planning framework. So at the start of a term of council, council outlines strategic priorities for the term through the strategic plan. Once that's done, annually, staff goes through the process of developing business plan objectives that go towards achieving the strategic priorities council has established. So during this process, we also identify resources that are needed to deliver on these objectives. So once that's happened and the business plan and budget are approved, what happens is these objectives get filtered down into departmental work plans for implementation. Next slide, please. So this shows a high-level timeline of the business plan and budget process for 2025. As was indicated earlier, we started this process in the summer, working on developing business plan objectives and identifying budget requirements. We held several interdepartmental meetings and meetings with the senior leadership team to develop these, and the result was a set of objectives that were provided for council for their consideration. So that happened in September, and committee and council ended up adopting those principles those objectives in principle. And based on those objectives, the mayor provided direction to staff to prepare the 2025 budget with those objectives in mind, and also with a set of guiding principles that were endorsed by council at the same time. So today's presentation is the first opportunity for committee and the public to get an overview of the proposed budget submission. Over the next couple months, we'll be going through the budget review process and hoping to adopt the proposed budget in December. So once that's adopted, staff will start going to work towards delivering the 2025 budget objectives, and in the new year, we'll be reporting to council on how we did in 2024 on delivering our objectives and our budget. Next slide, please. So for several years now, the town has remained in a strong financial position. So we remain debt-free. We have the lowest relative taxes in York Region for a typical 2-story detached dwelling. We've been building reserves, and we've been able to provide funding for key priority areas, such as operating new facilities like we did for the Operations Center and like we're doing now for the Health and Active Living Plaza, our focus on asset management, and for providing funding for community safety. Next slide, please. So taxes from new assessment are used to fund increased operating costs associated with new growth. So this chart shows our assessment growth over the past 7 years. So from 2015 to 2018, we had a significant growth spurt. So what you see here in 2018 is the last year of the significant growth spurt. Our assessment growth has been fairly significant still after those years. 4 to 6% is considered a fairly strong assessment growth. So we've been able to maintain that. In 2024, you'll see that there's a more modest projection of assessment growth. Right now, we're tracking at about 1.8%, but we're looking to be around 2% by the end of the year. So, but still a fairly strong assessment base. Next slide, please. So one of the guiding principles that staff have used to develop the budget over the past several years is to align the tax increase on our base program and services with the rate of inflation. So this graph compares the rate of inflation over the past several years with our tax levy increases on our base program and services. And you can see there's a gap between the inflation rate and our tax levy increases, and that cumulative gap is a bit over 12%. So that shows that our tax levy increases on our base programs and services have not been keeping pace with inflation. And that makes it difficult to provide to continue to provide our services to our community. But we've been able to manage to keep providing our quality services by a number of methods. So one is by doing more with less. Modernization, our modernization program has helped us to be able to do more with less. We've been able to leverage technology, and we've been able to profit from some of the grants that have been offered by the provincial and federal governments to help us leverage that technology. And we've also had the practice of delaying or deferring our resource requirements, in particular staffing, until absolutely necessary. So those have been some of the ways that we've been able to continue to deliver our services as we have for the community. So you'll notice in 2022 that there's been no tax levy increase on our base program and services. And in 2021, actually, that's a negative increase to our tax base, and that was to accommodate a dedicated funding for our emergency services and health and active living plaza. So that was during the pandemic, and it was totally justified to offer those tax levy reductions, but eventually those reductions end up catching up to us. Next slide, please. So I think committee is familiar with this slide. So each year, BMA Management Consulting conducts a survey of Ontario municipalities, and they look at various social, financial, and economic indicators. And one of the indicators they look at is relative taxes. And relative taxes are the actual amount of taxes that are paid on a like or similar dwelling in each municipality. So this shows the relative taxes paid on a typical two-story detached dwelling unit in York Region. And as you can see, East Gwillimbury has the lowest relative tax within the York Region municipalities. So the difference between the next lowest municipality and East Gwillimbury is $708. And we should note that in the survey before this, that gap was $616. So the gap is increasing. And similar to on the average, the difference between East Gwillimbury and the average is $1,142, and in the previous survey, it was $1,021. So on this chart, we're also showing what a 1% tax levy increase actually generates in terms of dollars for each municipality. And you can see that 1% generates different dollar values for each municipality, which makes it very difficult to compare tax increases if you're just looking at percentages, because each percentage generates a different amount. So it's hard to compare that when we're looking strictly at percentages. Next slide, please. So two of the largest annual municipal costs that a property owner, or to a property owner, is property taxes and water and wastewater billing. So this slide shows the combination of those two costs and compares them amongst all the municipalities in York Region. And you can see that East Gwillimbury has the lowest combined cost in York Region. So similar to the other slide, this gap has also increased. You can see that the gap from the next lowest to East Gwillimbury is $560. Previously, it was $396. Next slide, please. So based on the mayor's direction to staff and conversations with the mayor, staff are finalizing the 2025 budget that identifies resources required to deliver the business plan objectives approved by council. The total estimated expenditures for 2025 are approximately $75 million. So there's four components to the town's budget, the largest component being the property tax supported operating program with estimated expenditures of about $39 million. There's also components of the operating program that are supported by water rates and development and fees. And the final component of the total budget is our capital plan with an estimated cost of about $17.5 million. So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Ms. Adema to provide some more detail on the tax-supported operating budget.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of committee. So as you can see from this slide, the annual budget pressures for 2025, as we are proposing on the budget preview. The annual budget pressure is calculated by a full analysis of the expected expenses and contributions to reserves, offset by the expected revenues and draws from reserve. The net amount remaining requires funding to balance the budget. And after all other options are exhausted, the final amount must be balanced by implementing a tax levy increase. For 2025, this pressure is expected to be approximately 2.8 million, or 8.6%, if we were to translate that. The pressure summarized here on the chart, I will review further details on the next slide, but for illustration purposes, we've categorized the pressures here into the groups that you see on the pie chart. Base programs and services have a net pressure of 1.12 million. An increase investment and enhanced community safety in our fire services area creates a net pressure of approximately $800,000. As in past years, continued investment into asset management is critical, and this investment is an additional $330,000. The continuation of funding for the Health and Active Living Plaza requires a dedicated investment of $330,000. Finally, changing legislation and enhanced services require an additional investment in resourcing of approximately $240,000. Next slide, please. So now we dive into a little more detail, less colors. This slide provides some additional detail where the pressures are coming from. Within our base program pressure, we can see here the majority of the pressures, or approximately $900,000, is related to salary and benefit increases. These are allowances included in the budget for a cost of living increase for all staff, collective agreement provisions for when that is settled, and the provision for the implementation of the full-time salary market review that is currently underway. Given that salaries and benefits are approximately 75% of our tax-supported expenses, and we deliver the majority of our services through staff, it's not surprising that this is the main pressure point. As we will see in the upcoming slides that discuss new staffing for 2025, there are some pressures for resourcing that is required to respond to changing legislation and enhancing services. A slight correction on this slide, the 240,000 is correct. The 95 and the 145 need to be flipped, and I'll show you that on the staffing slides. 2025 is a year of increased focused investment in community safety through our Fire and Emergency Services Department. The majority of this cost pressure is related to the addition of 4 full-time firefighters. The balance of the cost pressure is related to increased costs and enhanced services within the Fire and Emergency Services Department. These would include an interim cost of living adjustment, job evaluations that resulted in increased costs in the administration, medical advisor changing legislation costs, increased costs for equipment repair, and increased software. A further enhancement into the asset management plan and continued provision for the operation of our Health and Active Living Plaza make up the balance of the cost pressures. As we review each of these categories, we're often faced with the question of what do these pressures mean for our residents? As mentioned earlier, a 1% increase on the tax levy is equivalent to approximately $327,000. When we speak in percentages, this is often hard to compare and quantify in terms of how much this will cost our residents. The far right column on this slide estimates the annual cost for the average household in East Gwillimbury for each of these categories. When totaled up, the annual increase for the average household is approximately $189, or about $15 per month. At this point, it's also important to mention that we do not take tax increases lightly. We do have a deferral program available for residents who may be facing financial hardships or be in a low-income category and cannot afford these increases. Applications are available on our website, and residents who qualify are encouraged to apply for this program. Tax increases can be deferred while they remain in their homes, and deferred amounts are settled upon change of ownership. Next slide, please. In addition to the cost pressures that require additional funding that we've already reviewed, we are experiencing cost pressures that come from the ongoing growth. In 2025, we expect the growth to be slightly lower than what we've experienced in the past years. That being said, there is still some assessment growth to be realized. The assessment growth for 2025 is approximately $585,000. When we compare this to 2024, that's approximately 50% of what we experienced in 2024. This comes from newly assessed properties that have been added to the property roll in the latter half of 2024. We've also increased the budgeted amount for supplementary taxes in 2025 up to a total amount of $600,000, but that's an increase of $95,000 from what we budgeted in 2024. Supplementary tax is difficult to estimate as there is a time period of up to 3 years to complete the full assessment from the date of occupancy. Our team in finance works closely with MPAC to ensure they have all the information they require so we can expedite this process where possible. Costs for 2025 that will be offset from additional revenue from assessment growth are described here. The main pressures we see come from staffing, which we will review in the upcoming slides. Increased volumes and modernizing processes require additional investments in software licensing, as well as increased homes require additional investments in waste collection, roads operations, and winter maintenance. There are also a variety of smaller expense lines that when combined add up to approximately $55,000. Examples of these would be bank processing fees, courier and mailing costs, communication costs, and similar administrative related costs. Next slide. In 2025, we are all excited to be involved in the final preparations and opening of the Health and Active Living Plaza. This facility will require additional full-time staff to assist with planning and booking our extensive program offerings, as well as facility staff to prepare and maintain the facility once open. In addition to the full-time staff, a roster of various part-time staff will be recruited to assist in delivering all those programs once we're open to the public. As done in previous years, the management teams work with the facility project management team to understand the timelines for opening and will only move forward with hiring when the resources are required. As these positions are funded from the previously dedicated funding that has been carved out for the health and active living operations, that funding is only drawn upon for the actual amounts that are required. Next slide. In 2025, there are new staffing resources required to continue with the enhanced service pilot programs that are related to council and committee support, as well as equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility coordinator. It's important to note here that while the council and committee support pilot is being required to continue on a part-time basis, the EDI position is being increased to a full-time position, but remaining as a pilot contract for another year. Both of these positions will continue to be funded from the working capital reserve while the pilots continue and results are brought back to council for review and consideration. Legislative changes will also require additional resourcing to address the changing needs of the municipal environment. A water quality analyst is required for that ongoing work and will be funded directly from the water and wastewater rates. An access and elections analyst is also required to prepare and plan for the 2026 election, as well as assist with increased workloads that is related to information access. This contract position will be funded from reserves. Positions relating to growth in a growing community are listed here, as they are all proposed to be funded from the assessment growth. A growing workforce and extremely competitive talent pool requires additional assistance and volume of work from our People and Belonging Department. Increased volumes and demands on the tax and utility team require additional resourcing. Growing communities also lead to increased requirements from our bylaw enforcement team, so you see added resources required in that area. Next slide, please. In addition to the positions that have various sources of funding to offset their costs, we have positions that are required and do not have funding associated with them for the full amounts. In 2025, there are new staffing resources required to provide the services that our community has become accustomed to. Enhancing and modernizing services require support from our information technology team. This position has partial funding from the Health and Active Living funding, however, not all of it. So some has a tax levy impact because it supports all staff across all facilities. Changing school and traffic landscapes also requires an increased investment in our children's safety when they are getting to and from school. Previously tested through successful pilot programs, we now have a need to add 2 permanent part-time positions to the base crossing guard program. Legislative changes require additional resourcing to address the changing needs of the municipal environment. An asset management lead is required to be a permanent member of the team to guide the town through legislative requirements related to the management of the long-term planning for our assets. This position has previously been funded through capital. That asset management position is proposed to be funded through a combination of tax levy and water wastewater rates to reflect the distribution of assets that it will look after. Privacy and Information Coordinator is required to respond to the increasing workloads related to the information access in the Clerk's Department. This position is funded through a combination of tax levy and fees to reflect the nature of the requests that are being received. Last but definitely not least is the addition of 4 full-time firefighters. As we heard from Chief Mainprize last week, community safety and the safety of our emergency services staff is paramount. And this request is an initial commitment towards that longer-term plan. Detailed staffing requests for each and all of these will be available as part of the full budget material, and they will provide further justification and detailed requirements for each of the positions I've just described. Next slide, please. In 2016, a multi-year funding strategy was created to begin the exciting planning and create tax room for each year to offset the requirement of a large tax levy increase required in the opening year for the Health and Active Living Plaza. It is estimated that the net operating costs of the Health and Active Living Plaza will be approximately $2.1 million. The current funding that has been previously dedicated is $1.5 million. That is already included in the 2024 base budget. There's an approximate $0.6 million remaining to fund to cover the costs of the help. This is the equivalent of about $22 per year in each of the next 2 years to reach the targeted operating cost for the average household. Next slide, please. As you are aware, staff are currently working on asset management plans. Legislation requires that municipalities develop a financial strategy to fund the asset management needs by 2025. This plan will assist in determining the optimum contribution to reserves to adequately prepare to replace the assets as required. This chart shows the annual and cumulative contributions that have been put in place since 2023, while the full asset management plan and financial strategy are being developed. In order to address the estimated $10 million funding gap, there are required contributions each year. Continuing this dedicated contribution and building on it in 2025 is the recommended approach. Next slide, please. As discussed at the council workshop last week, a plan is being developed to determine the most appropriate approach for community safety within the town from our fire and emergency services. This slide shows the investments we have made in suppression staffing to date. The 2025 budget includes 4 new firefighters that will bring the suppression staff to a total count of 24. The annual cost of adding further suppression staff when translated to the average cost per resident is approximately $10 per additional firefighter. Next slide. Assessed values of the EG homes are currently based on 2016 assessed values, and the average assessed value for those homes is about $670,000. A 1% tax levy increase results in approximately $327,000 of revenue and translates to about $22 to the average household. This means the proposed increase for 2025 is approximately $189 per year for the average homeowner in East Gwillimbury. Even with this increase, we expect that East Gwillimbury will maintain its status of lowest relative taxes in York Region. As noted on this slide, the increase is broken down between the 3 categories, as already discussed: base programs that includes inflationary and legislative pressures, growth-related pressures, and finally, service level enhancements. This budget allows for the existing programs and services with the related growth to continue. It maintains a focus on modernization and transformation so that we can utilize technology to offer improved services and enhanced service levels to our residents. One change you will notice when the full budget details are distributed is that all items are included in the budget as presented. In past years, we've presented all of these items separately, and they had to be manually added together to calculate what the full impact was. As we're now presenting the mayor's budget, all items will be included in the budget and discussed in detail during the upcoming budget committee meetings. At that time, if amendments are the desire of council, they can be proposed in those meetings. With that, I will pass the presentation over to Ms. Carolyn Brown for an overview of capital.
Good afternoon. As always, town staff are busy working diligently on a number of important capital projects that benefit the community in a number of ways. There's currently $69.9 million in approved capital costs that remain to be spent on these initiatives. And when considering the capacity of town staff to take on additional projects, it's important to acknowledge which works are currently in process and what's been previously committed. as it has implications on both resourcing and reserves. Some of the capital projects underway that are more significant in terms of time, cost, and resources required include the Health and Active Living Plaza, our investment in technology through the City View software enhancements and the Municipal Modernization Program, as well as significant investment in our community improvement and infrastructure maintenance. Next slide, please. $17.5 million in new capital projects have been proposed by staff and incorporated into the 2025 budget. The allocation of these costs among the departments reflects those departments that own and maintain the majority of the town's infrastructure assets, with engineering at 32%, water and wastewater at 30%, and parks, recreation, and culture at 24% of the 2025 budget submissions. Over the 10-year forecast period, we see parks, recreation, and culture's share increasing to 41%, which is influenced significantly by a number of expansions to our existing parks and indoor recreation facilities planned. Next slide, please. This slide shows both the 2025 budget and the 10-year capital program by funding source. We can see, excuse me, we can see that our plans for next year are principally funded by the reserves at just over 60% of the program, whereas over the 10-year forecast, we see that about 50% is funded by development charges. As we've seen the pace of development slow in the past year or so, it's appropriate to take this time to focus on infrastructure maintenance and repair. As development picks up into the future, which we expect that it will, more emphasis will be placed on capital projects that service growth and then appropriately funded by development-related fees and charges. Next slide, please. This provides you with a quick summary of what you can expect to see in the 2025 capital submissions list. We see an emphasis, as I mentioned, on repair and replacement of our existing assets. This includes our regular investment in the rehabilitation of our roads, water, and wastewater infrastructure network. We're also exploring a water quality partnership project, replacing some older playground infrastructure and renovating our Station 2-4 so that it properly serves the department. Improvements to our community include some new outdoor sports amenities, some plans for servicing of employment lands along Woodbine Avenue, and a Safer Streets initiative program. I'm now going to pass it back to Warren to conclude the presentation.
So the next component of the 2025 budget is the portion of the operating budget that's supported by development-related fees. So each of the service areas that are listed here are funded by fees that are intended to fully recover the cost of providing those services in each area. They're also supported by a reserve that manages the fluctuations between in development activity year after year. So for 2025, the proposed budgeted expenditures are increasing by about $200,000, and that's mainly due to increased salaries and benefits. Next slide, please. So the last component of the 2025 budget is the portion of the budget that's supported by water and wastewater fees, or rates, sorry. So budgeted expenditures for 2025 are anticipated to increase by about $1.2 million. So the largest pressure on the operating budget is the region's cost for providing water supply and wastewater treatment. Those costs make up about 2/3 of the town's water and wastewater operating budget. And the region recently, well, not recently, but a couple years ago, approved an increase to their rates of 3.3% per year for 6 years. So right now, we're in the middle of that rate increase. And with that rate increase, plus the projection of increased flows for water and wastewater, the pressure the regional costs have on the total budget is about $825,000 of that $1.2 million. So as well, new staff and salary and benefit increases represent about $300,000 of the pressure on the town's water and wastewater budget. There's a proposed increase to the town's variable rate, variable water and wastewater rates, which is in line with inflation, and also in line with the approved rates that were recommended as part of the water and wastewater study that was approved by council. There's also a proposed increase to the fixed water and wastewater rate charge of $1 per month per service, and that's the first time we've proposed an increase to that the base fixed rate since 2019. So as well, this is the final year of the phase-in of the revised methodology for the fixed rates on larger meters. That rate increase, that phase-in impacts approximately 1% of the users. So overall, there's an impact of a bit more than $4 per month for the average user. And as well, there's a capital budget submission of $5.3 million for 3 projects that are listed here, and that's included in that $17.5 million estimate for capital. Next slide, please. So for next steps, we're hoping to get the budget binders out to you next week for your review. On November 4th, we'll be in a position to have the mayor table the budget, which starts the clock in terms of the strong mayor's legislation. As we've done in the past, we will be meeting with council members individually to answer any questions you may have about the budget and to go through the budget submission, and that's planned for the week of November 6th. Approximately around that time, as well as we've done in the past, we'll be circulating other materials to you, such as a list of the previously approved capital projects, uncommitted reserve balance statements, and 10-year capital forecasts. Our budget committee reviews are scheduled for November 18th, 20th, and 27th. And if there are any amendments that are recommended by budget committee that comes out of those reviews, they will be tabled December 3rd for council to endorse. So in accordance with strong mayor's legislation, if the mayor wishes to use veto power, she has to do that by December 10th. And if council decides to wish to overturn the veto, that has to be done by December 17th. So that is an overview or preview of the 2025 budget, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? I'm not seeing Councillor Roy-DiClemente. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. Madam Mayor, I've completed 13 budgets with you. And I will say that this budget represents a departure from the way that you have governed in the past, over the past 13 budgets that I've completed with you. So I'll start those comments by that reflection. A lot of people are saying that if we're charging too little, because there's that gap, the flip side of that coin is perhaps they're charging too much. And the approach that I have always taken while sitting in this seat is that we need to live within our means. And that while we may identify issues and pressures, that we need to make some difficult decisions, and that throwing resources and throwing tax dollars at a problem is not always the answer, it's sometimes the answer. In this budget year, we have we've identified that we would like to invest in emergency services in our fire department. We know we have already made a long-term commitment to the Health and Active Living Plaza. Those are significant investments as they are. We also identified that we needed some assistance in our bylaw department. Okay, that's, from my perspective, that's where we start. Anything else beyond that is something that we need to address. And when I look at the slide for the cost pressures on the operating budget, I see the word enhanced services appears 3 times. That is not doing what we did before. That's an enhancement of our services. And so we need to be very mindful of that. From my perspective, I feel it's not 100% transparent to say that it is simply $189 per average household. Not everyone knows what their tax assessment level is. I certainly had to go and look mine up, and it is not $640,000, and I would argue that many of our residents don't have that. And so understanding what that percentage is on the increase is something that we need to be open about it. Last year was a year that we were saying, this is unprecedented, we have to catch up. We did so, and yet we're coming back with even more this time around. So I guess that's where my sort of high-level comments will start. As far as how I would like to see the process continue, I really would like to understand how those investments that we are making will change service delivery. So if it's for firefighters, what does that get us? How does that change service? We haven't identified the problem. The workshop that we had I think it was last week, when I said what comes next, it was an establishing and regulating bylaw and some service levels. It was not, we're going to hire firefighters. Obviously, that was the subtext, but I need to understand more about what's happening there. So what will these investments get us from a service delivery perspective? How will that change the bottom line? And I would also like a better understanding of what's happening with that assessment growth. The assessment growth you've calculated, you're projecting it to be $680,000. From the slides here, it looks like you've already spent that without any real understanding, from my perspective, of where that's going and why aren't we directing it towards the service pressures that we've identified, being the Health and Active Living Plaza, emergency services, and bylaws. So I'll leave my comments there, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Councillor LaHaye, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, through you. I too have some concerns, and I believe that our strategic plan, while it was mentioned a couple of times that all of what has been presented to us today is based on what's been approved by council, the strategic plan is a living document, and times are changing and things are different in 2024 than they were in 2023 or 2022, and I think we need to be able to have the flexibility to change along with those pressures that we are facing. And in our strategic plan vision that we have currently, it says to provide, I actually have it, I'm going to turn my camera down here. It says deliver value for tax dollars while providing quality services the community wants and needs. Well, I think we're at a position at a crossroads, quite frankly, where we can't have our cake and eat it too. So I will only be supporting staffing in an area of public safety, and those 4 positions are for new firefighters and for a water analyst, and I will not be supporting any new staffing in any other area other than public safety.
Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'll take a little bit of a different tact. First of all, I want to thank our staff for all the work that's gone into this. It started with our business plan, which council all agreed to, and I think that our change in practice, developing a business plan that we can all have input into, that will influence the budget, is a really positive step that we've taken as a municipality. This year we also had guiding principles that were agreed to by council, and I think that is also good. So moving us up to a higher level where we're setting direction, I think it is a positive step. Residents have asked us to keep taxes low, and I think you've shown us in this how low they are, that we're substantially below the next municipality and substantially below the average. So I think we are delivering for our residents. At what point are we underfunded? I hear what Councillor Roy-DiClemente is saying, and that, you know, maybe others are just charging too much, but we do often cite other municipalities and what they have, and we want the same things that they have, but at the same time, we've asked you to maintain our taxes as the lowest in the regions, our relative taxes. So I think that we're kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth when we do that, when we want what everyone else has, but we want to pay for it. So I think we need to be careful with that. The growing gap concerns me. Contrary to what my colleague said, we did not address it last year. We talked about it last year, but we are farther behind this year than we were the year previous. And that's going to continue to grow as long as we try and keep our increases the same as everyone else's increase. That gap is going to grow wider. I would very much like to see in a future presentation a chart that shows the gap between our relative taxes and the regional average over time, so we can get a really clear picture of how that is growing. Because if it continues to grow, we need to stop comparing ourselves to other municipalities. Because we are obviously offering or agreeing to offer a lower level of service because we have lower taxes. I like everything that's in here. I see lots of places where maybe we can tweak it a little bit. I think this year's a very different year where this is the mayor's budget, and we're going to all have to agree to amendments. So it's not just what you're supporting, it's what amendments are you going to put on the table, and can you get the support of your colleagues for those? So I think I want to see more details, obviously, when we get the budget binder, to think about what sort of amendments I would like to put forward to help bring the increase down a little bit. But I want to just end by saying again, thank you for all the work that's put into this and listening to what council's been saying all year. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of comments, and I do have a question. Maintaining the status of the lowest relative taxes in York Region, I'm not sure is necessarily good for us. Doesn't make our job any easier, for sure. Maybe we boast about it too much. I'm not sure. When I look at the tax rate increase that we're looking at now, that close to $200 per average household is a little, it stings a little bit, let's put it that way. You know, higher than inflation and all the rest of it. But with the growth pressures that we're facing, we certainly understand it, and I believe most of our taxpayers do also. This one is going to be interesting as we work through it. I look forward to the deliberations and the changes to the deliberations this year. I'm still not 100% sure that I see how this is all going to work out. My question, and I'm not sure that it's a easy one to answer, back on the base programs part where we talked about the market review and we had put some money aside for that in this budget, do we expect to have that result? Are we, without putting it badly here, are we that far behind? The wages and everything that we're paying our employees, do we expect that result? Is that a fair question?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's a fair question. It might not be a question for me, but it is a fair one. Maybe I'll pass that to Ms. Gandhi for her response.
Yes, through you. We are working with the consultants on compiling the information, and we are still reviewing. We haven't received the full preliminary results, but we anticipate that there will be a bit of a gap. So I don't want to predict anything, but I do anticipate that there'll be a gap.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Maybe I can ask Councillor Foster's question a little differently. I had the same sort of question. How much have we set aside for the market review increase? because there's a large dollar amount for 3 or 4 things in that presentation. So how much have we set aside for the market compensation review?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe the number is $300,000 for any results of the review.
Councillor Crone, then Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to our presenter. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for putting this together and you and your team walking us through this. It's, when we look at it, 189, that, to quote my colleague, yeah, that does sting a bit, but, nothing's for free. When I look at it, and I like to, maybe Councillor Foster's rubbing off on me, but I want to keep it simple. If I look at the cost, so 189 is the overall increase per household. We estimated that $54 was associated with community safety, correct? So if we all agree that community safety is important and we stand behind it and we believe in it, and we hypothetically, let's say that it goes forward. If you deduct that community safety portion out of it, that drops it down to 135, which is where we were last year. So we're maintaining what we had, I guess, last year, and then we're adding community safety. Maybe I'm being overly simplistic. Now, if we have issues about that 135, then I think it's up to all of us on this table to come up with those amendments. My understanding how the new process works, and this is our first year with the strong mayor's budget, it's up to us to provide the amendments, not to ask you guys to come up with the amendments to say give us a better number. We have to do a bit of the work. So I look forward to the binder and seeing where we could find some areas to trim here and there. But I want to ask you, Mr. Marshall, specifically there, let's go back to the community safety. We know that when we hire a new full-time firefighter, you have allocated in the budget what would be full pop for what we would hire them at, even though we know that a new firefighter doesn't get, they maybe get, I think there's the first, second, third, fourth class classifications of them. They don't get the top billing right off the bat. And so there is going to be, I think, some savings. Like, we're not going to use all that money. Hypothetically, if we hire them, we're not going to use all that money in the first year. So that should result in a surplus. I'm waiting for you to nod here, yes or no, but so if there is a surplus, what becomes of that surplus?
So through you, Madam Mayor. So there's a couple of things that we do with this budgeting for staff. One, we budget for top of band one because we know that when we're going out to the market, we're not always going to have someone that's going to come in at the bottom level. If we have someone that has experience and has the skills that we're looking for, they might not come in at band one, at step one of the process. So we have to provide for that in the budget. So we do that. We also, knowing that not always are we going to be hiring at top of band, we budget for gapping corporately. So that's to offset knowing that we aren't going to be hiring them at the top. So corporately, we have some provision in there that reduces the amount so we're not overtaxing. So third, if there does happen to be a result that there is some savings, that goes into the surplus amount, and the surplus gets allocated based on council priorities. And one of the priorities that we always suggest is asset management. And we know one of the pressures in asset management is our vehicle and equipment reserve, which is and the pressure is predominantly from the fire and emergency services equipment and vehicles that we need to to provide. So that surplus is going in to help fund emergency services as well.
Okay, Madam Mayor, if I may just, so you've already, just so I'm clear, you've already baked in the idea that there will be some surplus of some sort. And in the past, we've dedicated it to asset management. In the future, we could redirect that money, though, if we wanted to say future hires in the fire department. Is that reasonable to assume that?
So through you, Madam Mayor. So if you're talking about the end of year surplus, so that's basically a one-time funding source. So you could dedicate it towards hiring for the first year, but then you have to find that funding in next and future years.
Councillor Lahey, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. My question, through you, Madam Mayor, flows from Councillor Crone's question with regard to asset management. And so we are going to be given the budget binders next week, and then it's going to be tabled on November 4th, and the clock starts ticking, as my understanding. And so in terms of the funding plan for asset management to cover the $10 million gap, when will we be given as a council the information on the asset plan so that we can take that information into consideration?
So through you, Madam Mayor. So I can take a stab at it, and I can pass it on to Ms. Gandy, who's responsible for asset management. But so as part of legislation, we are required to provide a financial strategy, for funding any shortfall in asset management by July 1 of 2025. So we will be, as part of the update to the asset management plan that has to be provided as well, we'll be providing a financial strategy with that as well. So Ms. Gandy can add any additional information if there's any.
And if I may, thank you. If I may, Madam Mayor, I have one further question. So what you have stated is that the increase to the average household is going to be $189. That is what you have proposed, and through the mayor. And so, but that represents only one portion of the increase in taxes that residents are going to see. They will, in addition to the $189 that the municipality will be putting upon the taxpayer, there was also the portion of York Region and of the school board. So do you have an idea now that you can share with us what the York Region and what the school board portions will be in addition to ours?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I don't have any details at this time. For the last couple of years, the school board portion has been frozen. So I'm not sure if it's going to be frozen again for this year, but, the region, if I understand correctly, are starting the discussions on their budget process right now. So there's, the information is yet to come.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Mayor. Do we have an idea of when they will announce their tax increases? And will it be while we're conducting our budget deliberation?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe the schedule for the region is to have something approved by the end of November, so there might be some time. But if there's any delays or deferral of their discussion, it won't happen in the end of November.
Councillor Roy-DiClemente, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Councillor Crone sort of subtracted the price of the new firefighters to kind of bring us to a net number. There's another way of looking at it, and that is if 4 new firefighters cost us $800,000, we have $680,000 of new assessment growth projected. That leaves us with a funding shortfall of $120,000, which is less than 0.4% of an increase on our tax dollars. Obviously, we have more of a discussion to have, but there's more than one way to look at this issue. And I think we need to have a much more holistic look than to try and parse this about how we're going to sell this to the community, but rather how we're going to deliver the best value for the tax dollars that we can raise and that we continue to collect. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Not seeing any at this time. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of the staff. I know that it's not just one person, but you have the paperwork today in your hands, so we'll thank you, and also all those that have worked with you to come to the point that you're at this time. Thank you. I have Councillor Crone moving the resolution. All those in favor? And that's carried. We're moving to item H, at this time, corporate services with Councillor Carruthers in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have two reports before us today. The first is our Indigeneity, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Action Plan, which will herefore be called IDEA, because indigeneity is a tough word. We're going to hear the presentation, and then I'll ask for some motions on this. Over to you, General Manager Gandhi.
Through you, Madam Chair, I will just start with a couple of words about the IDEA action plan. I was practicing indigeneity over and over again, so there I got to say it. So the action plan is a result of several months of consultation with staff, with advisory committees of council, and with various community groups. Shannon Giansapalu will, our EDI engagement coordinator, will shortly describe the plan and how we arrived at the initiatives outlined. I want to really stress that the plan is rooted in the equity, diversity, and inclusion framework that Council endorsed in 2021. It's also a direct outcome of the Council-approved strategic plan, which speaks to the importance of social well-being, supporting a sustainable future where residents and businesses can thrive, and under the priority of culture of municipal excellence, being an accessible, welcoming community that embraces equity, diversity, and inclusion. As a growing community, the action plan is needed because our community is becoming increasingly diverse. We often talk about EG being Canada's fastest growing municipality over the last two census periods. And while we grew by 44% over that time, the racialized population increased by 300%. And that means that the majority, or about 72% of all of those newcomers to EG, are racialized. And that's very, very important, because that is needed. We need to have that information, and we need to be intentional about our efforts to address indigeneity, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. We need to develop policies that support our workforce and our efforts to bring a culture of belonging, and that's within our organization as well. The action plan will guide the programs we deliver and how we engage with the community and with each other. And I trust that this presentation will demonstrate how we plan to achieve this goal. I also want to point out that the recommendation that's listed in the agenda really needs to be restated to say that the draft 2024-2027 Indigeneity, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Action Plan be approved by Council. So there's a few extra words in the current agenda that needs to be removed, and I've shared that with the clerk.
Thank you. I've got that. Thank you.
My name is Shannon Giansapalu, and as Mita mentioned, I am the Town of East Gwillimbury's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Engagement Coordinator. I'm really grateful to be here today presenting to the Council on the IDEA Action Plan. IDEA, as we said, stands for Indigeneity, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, and I will be referring to it as the IDEA Action Plan. Next slide, please. The submitted staff report and its appendix presents the East Gwillimbury Draft 2024 to 2027 IDEA Action Plan to Council, including a backgrounder about the work, process for the plan's development, and the future approach to implementation of the plan. I want to emphasize that the action plan presents the what of what we will do in terms of our focus in this work and the objectives we will work to achieve with your approval. The how we will achieve these objectives specifically will be developed as an implementation plan led by myself and the town staff that will be more specific about our metrics to measure progress and the specific timelines of each tactic that will be used to achieve the various objectives stated. As Mita raised, East Gwillimbury really is a diverse place currently. According to, next slide please. According to the Stats Canada census of 2021, 30% of EG residents are racialized, with 9.3% of all racialized people in East Gwillimbury being members of the Black community. Also, 1.4% of EG residents identify as having Indigenous background, which is 7.9% of the Indigenous population in York Region. And as our diversity is continuing to grow, our population is projected to reach over 127,000 by 2051. Next slide, please. So I think understanding the context of East Gwillimbury and the statistics of our demographics really helps to explain part of the impetus strongly for this action plan. So the current diversity of EG and the projected increase in EG's diversity provides a strong reasoning as to why an action plan is needed so that we can effectively serve our entire community. At least 6 municipalities in York Region also have equity-related action plans. And so the IDEA action plan ensures that EG will continue to demonstrate leadership in equity initiatives. Having an action plan, such as the one presented, can allow for equity work that is accountable, effective, and that can be measured to ensure meaningful progress. Importantly, the action plan supports and realizes commitments already made by the town of EG, such as the statements made in the York Region Inclusion Charter, which EG signed on April 10th, 2019, and EG's strategic plan, which contains strategic priorities directly linked to equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. Next slide, please. The very initial stages of the action plan were drafted by myself as the EDI engagement coordinator based on my over 2 decades of experience in equity work, and also informed by an environmental scan of what neighboring municipalities in York Region have done in this area of work, as well as standout work that has been done across the country. The action plan shifts from using the acronym EDI to IDEA, adding the terms indigeneity and accessibility. This new acronym better captures the scope of the work as EG continues to make progress. Indigeneity serves as an umbrella term in the plan, and so includes truth and reconciliation, strengthening relationships with Indigenous communities, and engaging in meaningful consultations with Williams Treaties First Nations, for example, as well as actions that identify and serve to reduce harms caused by colonization. Accessibility involves taking a beyond compliance approach to create a community that is barrier-free for everyone. The plan takes an anti-oppressive framework approach to ensure we are naming the root causes of inequity and the approaches that we will take to address them. The initiatives are therefore organized into 6 key areas of work, which touch on approaches that are really fundamental to addressing inequities and creating a culture of belonging for everyone, such as anti-racism, two-spirit LGBTQIA+ inclusion, and dismantling anti-Black racism. Further, the document serves as an educational tool. It describes key concepts and provides a glossary. It also gives an opportunity for the town to do impactful storytelling about the amazing IDEA work already happening before I arrived, and the important equity work that lies ahead that had already been planned. It includes initiatives that are already underway and that are proposed for the future. As Mita mentioned, the action plan draws from the foundational East Gwillimbury EDI framework, which Council endorsed in 2021. It is, as I mentioned, reflective of the environmental scan I conducted of York municipalities in terms of their EDI-related action plans, programs, and services already underway. A 3-hour workshop was delivered to EG leadership, which included a process of asset-based community development activities, meaning it drew on and brainstormed about the town's existing strengths, resources, staff expertise, and more to help identify what tools we can use to address inequities. The development of the plan incorporated internal and external feedback. Internally, leadership who participated in the workshops participated afterwards in feedback sessions, and we also conducted external feedback sessions with key community organizations that included the Georgina Island First Nation, the New Market African Canadian Caribbean Association, or NACA, the York Region Alliance of African Canadian Communities, Black York Region Youth, and York Pride. Next slide, please. For the plan's implementation, with your approval, myself, as the EDI engagement coordinator, will collaborate with relevant internal departments and community groups to implement the action plan in an effective and accountable way. It will also involve engaging in continued engagement and feedback. The implementation plan that is developed will set key performance indicators and break down the timelines for each initiative, evaluating progress and identifying remaining challenges as the plan progresses. It will include presenting semi-annual updates and an annual progress report to council to increase accountability. Any related costs related to the action plan will be brought forward to council in accordance with the procurement bylaw and operating budget processes. Further, relevant grants will be identified to work to increase resources available for this work. Some initiatives are already underway, and some objectives identified reflect applying an EDI and accessibility lens to the work that we are already doing to ensure that justice principles are reflected in everything that we do. And this is possible through the use of existing budgets by applying a relevant lens of how we engage in this work, oftentimes. Some initiatives, as I mentioned, have already been identified and are meaningfully underway. Next slide, please. I chose 4 objectives as some examples of what is contained in the action plan. For example, Initiative 1.13 involves conducting an IDEA employee survey to assess the level of diversity and experiences of staff related to inclusion, belonging, equity, and human rights. This is a common wise practice broadly used across organizations to help understand the current state of equity and inclusion and to consider meaningful initiatives to continue progress forward. Another example I wanted to draw on is 6.03, which is to apply for grants that can improve accessibility of EG spaces. Some of these grants have already been identified and present really excellent opportunities to increase resourcing for increased accessibility. In conclusion, this multi-year IDEA action plan maps out our journey of creating a town where diversity is celebrated, program spaces and services are accessible and equitable, and everyone feels a sense of belonging. The action plan also will further our commitment to truth and reconciliation while forging stronger relationships with Indigenous communities. And I really want to express great gratitude to the mayor and this council and to EG leadership, as well as the community members who have made this work possible by already creating a foundation of a culture where belonging is really valued and by contributing so meaningfully to this process. And that also includes the advisory committees of council who provided really important feedback. So thank you for receiving this presentation.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, first of all, say incredible work. I read through that whole big document, and there is so many gems in there. You've really done a great job with this. I think everyone in this room wants our town to be welcoming and barrier-free, and often we don't even know what barriers are there until we experience it. I'd never thought twice about the elevator until I broke my foot. So I think we all are in a position where we don't know what the barriers are until we've actually lived in someone else's shoes. there's one piece in the report that really jumped out at me about keeping pace with other municipalities. And I think when we speak to hiring, that's going to be really important that we're keeping pace in this. But first, I should actually put these motions on the table. The first one is that the report be received, and the second one is that the draft IDEA action plan be approved by council. So can I get someone to move that? Councillor Foster, and I'll open it up to any questions. Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Roy-DiClemente.
Again, I'll go first. I think we've done some really great work here, that we've identified some areas for us to examine, for us to understand better. I feel that at this point, we have a list of 73 things, but I don't feel that we have a good enough understanding of what actions are the greatest priority for our community. So having done an environmental scan to say this is work that we need to do is good, but I want to hear from our staff what they're experiencing. What are the priorities? There's 73 things. We can't do them all at once. What's the most important piece? And I know that feedback was something that you received from one of the advisory committees. When you reached out to them, they said, whoa, this is too much. Where are you going to start? What are your deliverables? What are the problems that you have identified that need to be addressed first? Where do we start? And what does it look like when we're done? Obviously, we're never going to be done. What does it look like when we've made progress? And I think that, for me, that's what's most important. There were some functional issues in the document for me. They're more like typos and documents things that would make it more accessible for me to understand what was happening. There's an asset list that doesn't have a label, things like that. I think the draft is good, but I want to hear more about what our community needs, what our staff need, and quite frankly, what council wants to see worked on first. That would be where I would start. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is a draft, so that some of those typos and that will be ironed out. Do you have a response on where we would start and what is the highest priority?
Yes, so in terms of the timeline of implementation, that was considered in my consultation with community organizations as well as staff. But the more beyond the year timeline window that each objective would be addressed, that's where the implementation plan would come in to be more specific. And that would require further consultation. Some of it involves creating working groups that can help to guide that work. And a wise practice that we've seen across York Region municipalities is that they bring forward an action plan naming the priorities and areas of focus and overarching objectives, and then they follow that up with a specific implementation plan, which is at a level where the town has identified and had approved what we plan to focus on, and now we're working through how we are going to do that. And I pass it over to Ms. Gandhi for any other thoughts.
Through Madam Chair, I just want to stress, so thank you very much for that response, Shannon. The other piece that is very important to consider is we talked about this being built on the foundation of the EDI framework, and in that framework you'll recall that we had different components. One was to engage, educate, and express. We have spent a lot of time and energy over the last number of years in developing all of those areas, and so the priorities would be to further enhance the engagement. We don't want, there's a saying, nothing about me without me. And so a key component in terms of a priority is to make sure that whatever action we're taking, we're doing in step with the communities that we are working with, and that applies to all elements of the IDEA action plan. So that would be a number one priority, is to further that engagement and to make sure that we're getting it right. It's better to do that before embarking on specific initiatives. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. That clarifies it a lot. Councillor Foster, you had your hand up? Okay. Councillor Leahy?
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. My question relates to the plan. And is the plan based on the assumption that there is the hiring of a full-time staff member to action all of these steps in the plan?
Ms. Gandhi?
Ms. Gandhi?
It's not working. There we go. Yes, through Madam Chair. One of the things that's key about this action plan, and it was also a key component of the EDI framework, is that this is not about one person taking on all of the responsibility. It really is a collective activity where the responsibility lies in all of the departments. If we were to not hire a full-time position, yes, and a lot of this work would be done much slower, if at all, because we do need to have a person who is dedicated in this role to help to advance this. Would it stop all of our IDEA work? No. I can say this is an area that I was personally responsible for and still continue to oversee, but with Shannon in place, it's been considerably, the EDI engagement coordinator in place, it's been, the evidence in the volume of work is there in terms of what we can possibly achieve.
Thank you. And it was one of the things I noted to you when we had met, that the charts within the report that show staff involved, I really loved how it was every department, that there was something for everyone to be doing across the town, because this is the work of all of us, and we all need to be doing this work. So I thank you for that. Councillor Leahy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I have a couple more questions. Having serving as the council liaison for the Accessibility Advisory Committee, we had the pleasure of you joining us for a couple of the meetings to discuss plans and to get feedback from the advisory committee, and we appreciate that very much. It was a very helpful and productive conversation, which I enjoyed. And so I also have served on the committee that was formed to provide the first community-driven Lunar New Year celebrations, and that was a tremendous success. And so I think we already have successes that we can celebrate in terms of belonging and community, parts of the community who are engaged and supportive of celebrations that celebrate their cultures. So I look forward to seeing more of that. My question is, with regard to the survey that you stated you were going to conduct to assess the level of diversity in staffing and to use in the hiring process, will the council members be involved with this survey regarding diversity of staffing?
Can I pass that to Ms. Gandhi? Thank you.
Through Madam Chair, we haven't worked out the logistics of the survey as yet. It is currently intended to be a staff survey, and so in that respect, council members would not necessarily be involved in that, but we have not finalized all of the arrangements.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Leahy? Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? So, like I said, an incredible amount of work has gone into this. It's given us a really clear indication of where there's work to be done, and I look forward to an implementation plan once this is finalized. For now, staff are asking council to approve the draft so they can take it forward for any more input. And we have the two motions on the floor to receive and to approve the draft made by Councillor Foster. If no more questions, all in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Second, thank you very much, Shannon. Much appreciated. Our second report is the draft council compensation policy that is here to be received and to be approved. And I'll turn over to General Manager Gandhi for that.
Through you, Madam Chair. So on June 25th, 2024, staff presented a report to council seeking council direction to proceed with a council compensation review aligned with the 2024 full-time market review and to develop a council compensation policy. Since then, we determined that the policy work is a critical first step because it is the policy that will determine the approach that is adopted for any changes to council compensation. We also separated out the full-time market review because we determined that, like the approach for council compensation, a staff compensation policy is also needed. We will be bringing the staff compensation policy to council before the end of the year. And with that, the council compensation policy is before council for consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Can I get someone to move receipt and approval of this draft compensation policy? Councillor Crone. And I can open it up to questions. I just want to make the initial comment to thank you for the work on this, that it does follow from what we have been doing, just getting it into policy so that it's very open and transparent, what has been our process all along. Thank you. Comments or questions? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I don't have a comment or a question, but I'd like to request a recorded vote on this. Thank you.
We're in committee, Councillor Leahy. We can't have recorded votes in committee. No other questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. And if there's nothing else, General Manager Gandhi, I'll turn that back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are moving to item L, Development Services, with Councillor Roy-DiClemente in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a number of items on the agenda this afternoon. The first being a planning branch report regarding a request for street name endorsement for Tricap Properties, which is the southwest corner of 2nd Concession and Mount Albert Road. May I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Foster. Ms. Bégin, would you like to present this report?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This request is based on names that were selected from the approved street name inventory. Staff are satisfied that they are appropriate and that many of them are aligned with the location in Holland Landing. Certainly open to answer any questions that members of committee may have.
Thank you. Any members of the committee have questions? Go ahead, Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Not a question, but just a comment. I was happy to see these street names come through with a good blend of Holland Landing history. We've got some Indigenous stuff there. We've got veterans in there. We kind of cover everything, so I think that looks good. One thing I did want to mention was in the report, it kind of leads you to believe that Marge Jakes had something to do with the current school that's on Holland River Boulevard, which is not correct. I just thought I would bring that to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Ms. Bégin, you looked like you had your finger on your mic. We're good? Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I've got a motion moved by Councillor Foster that we receive and endorse the proposed street names. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is a memorandum regarding provincial planning statement of 2024. It might be 2024 Part 1. We never know with that. But anyway, Ms. Bégin, would you like to present this memorandum, please?
Thank you, to you, Madam Chair. This is a sort of an overview of the changes that will be enacted with the new provincial planning statement. It essentially combines what was the former planning statement and the growth plan. The growth plan applied to the greater horseshoe area of Ontario only. This document now applies to the province uniformly as a whole. We do understand that there's a lot in here, and our Director of Planning Policy is here to speak to it should members of council or members of committee have any specific questions. Also wanted to make the offer that if there's interest, we could certainly plan for a more fulsome workshop at a later date if that's of interest.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Perhaps I should ask if anyone has a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Leahy. Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Leahy, please.
No questions through you, Madam Chair, but I would be very supportive of a workshop that would help council understand all of the nuances and all of the changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Staff, you've taken note of that. I thought it was particularly helpful to understand that the growth plan and the PPS had been merged into a province-wide document. I hope that will create some consistency for the rules of engagement. A little concerned about the expansion of the settlement area without a municipal comprehensive review. That said, our official plan process, we had asked for the entire community to be part of the OP, all of the White Belt lands to be included. So I think from that perspective, it's less of a concern. The same thing with employment land conversion. I think that might apply to elsewhere in the province. In our case, we're still trying to build employment land. I don't see us seeing the need to convert it. But if other members of committee would like a workshop, does anyone feel that they need more information than what's in the memorandum? Councillor Carruthers?
It was my understanding in reading the memo that a lot of it doesn't really apply to us, and there wasn't going to be a big impact on EG. So I think my question when I was reading through it was, what changes for us? And my reading of the memo is that not really a lot.
Ms.
Is that
Bégin?
true?
Thank you, and perhaps I'll invite Jack Krubnick to speak to this as well if he has anything to offer. But essentially, I think what's specifically of interest to our municipality is the new definitions around complete communities, which I think reinforces council's strategic direction. It will certainly be a benefit going forward. It remains to be seen if it will allow us to have an impact on historical approvals, but I think it does strengthen our position as we're very much in line with provincial objectives when it comes to walkable and complete communities. Other than that, I think it really will not have a significant impact. We are seeing some inquiries on settlement boundary expansions, and we'll likely, as the chair mentioned, be dealing with some of that. But aside from the issues of perhaps bringing them into the urban boundary, we are still so constrained by servicing that the development will still need to be phased according to when servicing is expanded. I don't know if, Jack, you want to add anything further?
Anything further to add?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hello, members of council, and thank you through you, Madam Chair. So I think we got the bulk of the understanding there. I don't see kind of a great kind of foundational change to planning from our end. There are a few things that you had mentioned in regards to municipal comprehensive review, as it relates to boundary expansion and as it relates to employment areas. The boundary expansion one probably less of a concern, but the employment one without a municipal comprehensive review, that's something that can impact us because someone can technically perhaps apply to take lands out of an employment area. Other than that, there's a few items as well, and we could probably go through them in further detail within a workshop. Some of them relate to additional residential units in prime agricultural lands, as well as the fact that perhaps I was a little slighted as we didn't make the list of 29 large and fast-growing municipalities within Southern Ontario, but I do think that is a list that may change in the fullness of time as well, and we may see ourselves back on there.
Thank you. So I have a motion on the floor from Councillor Leahy. Oh, further questions? Go ahead.
No, thank you through you, Madam Chair. I wanted to amend the motion and add the fact that I would like to benefit from a workshop that covers all of the items that Jack just mentioned, that could include agricultural lands as well, because we have seen recently that there is a tremendous concern from farmers about the tree draft bylaw that we're working on at the town. And so I think it's an opportunity in the future. We should always take the opportunity to learn. So I would like to amend the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, members of committee, we have a motion on the floor that we receive the memorandum and that we request staff prepare a workshop. Any questions on the motion? Go ahead,
I
Councillor
believe you
Carruthers.
need a vote on the amendment.
Ah, okay. Even though it's the main mover who's making that motion? Madam
Yes.
Clerk?
Through Madam Mayor, the amendment would have to be dealt with first.
Okay, so let's make a motion, that we have a motion on the floor to amend the original motion to include the workshop. All those in favor? opposed? So that motion is defeated. So we have the original motion on the floor that we receive the memorandum. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Okay, next item on our agenda is a memorandum regarding rental fee reductions for local business. Ms. Bégin, did you want to present that, please?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is just really to introduce a letter that was received, or was directed to Mayor and members of council, requesting a fee reduction for rental of town facilities. Certainly able to answer any questions that members of council may have. And our Manager of Economic Development, who's been working very closely on this file, is also here to provide context if necessary.
Thank you. Before I open the floor up to questions and comments, I did want to ask Ms. Ingram. It's my understanding that the Municipal Act has some provisions about providing direct financial contributions to businesses and so on and individual parties. I'm just wondering if we were to consider this, would this put us offside with respect to the Municipal Act?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, if the individual, that municipality wishes to provide some kind of financial benefit or relief that isn't offered to others, that would put you offside the bonusing provisions under Section 106 of the Municipal Act.
Thank you. That certainly colors my perception of the matter. Members of committee, anything that you would like to ask at this point? May I have a motion to receive the memorandum? May I have a motion to receive the memorandum? Moved by Councillor Crone. Any questions on the motion? And that motion, sorry, may I have all those in favor? Go ahead, Councillor Johns.
I just want to clarify. So the motion is to receive but not direct the reduction?
That's my understanding, Councillor.
So we're going to receive it but not provide direction?
At this point, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Crone, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I may amend my motion to receive and direct staff to offer the reduction.
We need to vote on the amendment. See, I learn. So we have a motion on the floor by Councillor Crone that we receive and provide a rental reduction in the amount of?
Was it not prescribed in the? Sorry, was it not prescribed in the letter?
It was a 75% reduction?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Can we have discussion on the motion?
Absolutely. On the amendment to the motion. Go ahead.
So we just received advice from our solicitor saying that we would be in contravention of an act that governs this, but we have a motion to debate the reduction, even though it's in contravention of an act. Is that clear to me? Is that clear?
That appears to be what's happening, Councillor Johns. So if members of committee wish to move that we go in contravention of the advice of our lawyer, then we can.
Can I follow up question?
Yes.
We're talking about user fees. I don't understand why this is in the planning department and under economic development. Like, why is this not a Parks and Recreation item? How are we here?
Ms. Bégin?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think because of the complexity and some of the, the volume of discourse around this particular file, it was being project managed by our Manager of Economic Development, and that's sort of how it ended up being shepherded through this process by the Manager of Economic Development. But we certainly had consulted with Mr. Karmazin with respect to the request and as part of this. But
It was the fees and services bylaw that does not provide for Mr. Karmazin to provide relief.
Exactly.
Probably because of the Municipal Act.
and the same can be said for planning and building-related fees. So.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Johns.
Can I understand what volume of discourse means?
Go ahead, Ms. Bégin.
It's my understanding that there's been a lot of correspondence directed at members of council and members of senior staff regarding the application for a building permit for the expansion of the facilities known as Kicks Dance Studio. So that's what I was referring to, that it has been, I guess, perceived to be contentious, to say the least.
Councillor Leahy, go ahead. Sorry, is it, yes?
Stay on the line?
Yes, stay on the line, and I'll see you next, Councillor Leahy. Go ahead, Councillor Johns.
So what I thought was a user fee item moved to planning, and then planning is saying that there was a volume of discourse, and then I just heard another word, contentious. So it seems to me that this has been tabled as an opportunity of remedy, and if this is an opportunity of remedy, I don't know that it would fall under a rental fee reduction versus a without prejudice gesture of goodwill to address the volume of discourse. And so if that was the case, and that was the reason for doing this, then I would believe that this isn't necessarily a rental fee reduction so much as it is a without prejudice gesture of goodwill, which wouldn't be addressed under the Act. And if that was the case, then I would be able to support that if that was the case.
Ms. Bégin.
Just a point of clarification, it's not a planning matter. Development Services looks after economic development, and that's how it came through. And economic development has been providing direct support to the business owner. So I just want to clarify that. Just
So
it wasn't
I want to clarify it again, because I'm hoping it's not an economic development matter, because then I would be thinking that economic development would be bringing forward all kinds of opportunities for other businesses. And so if this did stem from a volume of discourse within planning, and then planning felt that there was an opportunity to remedy the situation through, again, a gesture of goodwill that was without prejudice, then that wouldn't be an issue for me to be able to vote in favor of that, because I think that we would be within the lines of addressing a challenge that was,
I see your hand.
the challenge that was contained within the planning department, because I wouldn't think that the economic development department was looking to go around and provide fee reductions for private businesses.
Ms. Bégin.
There's, again, a point of clarification, it's not a planning matter. The bulk of the discussions had to do with buildings, the building department, or building branch. And as indicated in the memo, there is no recommendation by staff. It's brought forward for council's consideration in recognition that council had, through their engagement with this file, expressed interest in the outcome, and for that reason, we felt it was appropriate to proactively bring this forward for council's consideration.
So it's simply a piece of correspondence with a staff covering memo providing some context.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Leahy, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Chair. Since we have the individual staff member in economic development who was instrumental in resolving the 2.5-month saga, and the copious concerns expressed by members of the community, I would hope that perhaps we could hear to provide some clarification from Brennan Kenny on this that would help us in our voting. Thank you.
Before we recognize or suggest that Mr. Kemi come to the microphone, Councillor Carruthers, you had a question?
It can be after that.
Okay. welcome.
I'll make sure we have the right button. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I think as Ms. Béger mentioned, economic development has sort of been shepherding this through as a project management exercise. And usually our project management can encapsulate engineering and building and planning and sort of that development process and sort of the guise of the client. So the client in this case was a business. We felt it made sense internally for the business development branch essentially to support that business through that, even though it is a technical matter. They were going through and checking their zoning, for example, to start, and then working through the building branch to get that permit. So it's not a suggestion, there's no recommendation that we've made here. I think we wrote a memo, we found it made sense for the project manager to write that memo, and that's why it's presented under economic development. But there's no recommendation. It's really just to provide council the context, as I've been the main point of contact with the client throughout on the request. So hopefully that helps.
And thank you for doing that, Mr. Kenny. We, as council, we often talk about how we need to find a way to help parties who are not professional developers work through the process. And so that's certainly what the service that you have delivered in this circumstance. I want to thank you for that. Councillor Carruthers, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. I'm just struggling with this. I keep hearing it's not a recommendation, it's not a suggestion, but it's right there in the memo. And a memo from our staff, they're saying that we may wish to consider, not just a permit reduction, but a 75% reduction. So to me, that is a specific target. So to me, that is a suggestion, maybe not a formal recommendation, but a recommendation. So I have a little bit of trouble when staff are recommending something, but at the same time saying they're not recommending something. I'm wondering if Mr. Valchik could weigh in on this to help me understand what is it that your staff are recommending for us to do.
Mr. Valchik?
Madam Chair, through you, I think my interpretation of this memo when it was presented to me is that there, and it's pretty clear in the wording there, that staff are suggesting that council may wish to consider this fee reduction. However, staff have not gone as far as saying we recommend that you approve it, but rather that you consider it. I think it is appropriate for you to ask of the staff that put the memo together, do they recommend it or not?
Thank you. So I'm asking you now, do you recommend this or not?
I think to speak in open council, if my job is to advocate for the business community, pending municipal act, I'm not going to recommend anything that goes against municipal act. That's kind of the way that I'm going to handle this. My job is to advocate for the business community, but it's also to work within the municipal act. So,
thank you. So this is my confusion, that we're having one of your staff saying one thing, our solicitor, and then another member of your staff saying something else. I'm looking to our CAO to clarify what is being recommended to us.
Okay, Mr. Kenny, can you turn your mic off, please? Mr. Valchik, go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, through you, the question was just asked. I haven't had time to actually confer with our solicitor, but the question was asked, would this be in conflict with the Municipal Act? I can tell you on behalf of staff, staff will not be recommending anything that suggests that council make a decision in conflict with a piece of legislation, period. And so having not had a chance, because this memo doesn't address the Municipal Act question that was asked, I'm not well versed in that part of it. But if in fact that is accurate, and we heard that from our solicitor, then I would suggest that staff are in absolutely no way recommending something that would suggest that council make a decision in conflict with existing legislation.
Thank you. I have Councillor Foster and then Councillor Crum. Go ahead, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm more confused now than I was when we started. So I'm reading between the lines. There was a problem in the process somewhere. So how can we change this, rework this with staff's recommendation to somehow make it better for our business, that we all want to open and do their thing. But obviously, we're not going to support something that's in contravention of the act. So I think this needs to go back for some more work to make me understand it. There's got to be something else we can do. And again, I'm reading between the lines. There had to be a problem somewhere in the process of how this all happened. Thank you.
Ms. Bégin, and then Councillor Crone.
If I may, just to provide some context, this, it was a contentious application. It is still in progress. We've undertaken a process of sort of looking at what we can do to better communicate and help, especially non-developers, understand the process. That being said, the process is valid. The technical recommendations and the technical assessments are valid. Whether or not people like the answers they receive is another matter. And in this instance, the applicant was very vocal in expressing their concerns to members of council. They engaged a number of members of the public to also reach out to council. So it was in recognition of that we felt, rather than just allowing the correspondence to go forward on its own, that we felt it was appropriate for the project manager to provide a covering memo to provide context. That being said, we are very limited in terms of any approaches for remedy, as Councillor Johns has indicated, in terms of making amendments to the, or changes to the fees, under the fees and charges bylaw. It certainly does present the risk of establishing a precedent, and there are concerns about whether or not the interpretation would be that it would be direct financial benefit from a municipality to a business. But we felt that given the amount of correspondence and the concerns expressed by members of committee throughout the process, that it was worthy of at least bringing it to your attention for consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Bégin. Councillor Crone, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just direct my question to our solicitor, could you please, just for my own benefit, restate what you said a few minutes ago about why you think this is against the Municipal Act?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll probably not restate exactly what I said before, because that would be impossible, but the bonusing provision under the Municipal Act will not allow municipal government to give preferential treatment in a financial way to private sector businesses. There are some notable exceptions in that statute, but this isn't one of them. So when asked about whether this would be offside that bonusing provision, it is, in my opinion, it is. Because if, say, Kicks, do I have the name of the studio right? Kicks Dance Studio, if they were given this reduction in the, whatever the lease was supposed to do, and given this reduction because of whatever reason, doesn't really matter what the reason is, and the next person, the next tenant comes along and rents the studio, and we say, well, here's the rate, and it's not the Kick Dance, there's your problem. So you have to be careful as a municipal government, excuse me, to not fall offside that. Now, some of these things are, they're assessed by materiality. So this might be a small thing, but, when you get the profile and you get it in the Toronto Star for other things with other municipal governments that they've done, it becomes, you've got a spotlight on you. So, in my view, I wouldn't recommend doing it, because this one is a small one and it's offside, and like I said, so why put a spotlight on you?
Okay, I appreciate the feedback. Based based on that, I will, Madam Chair, withdraw my amendment, but I will suggest, as I think Councillor Foster has said, we've had some new information introduced with the implication of the Municipal Act. I would recommend that maybe we send this back to staff, look at it a little closer, give you, Madam Solicitor, a little more time to marinate on this. And I would like to know that when we come back with a report to Council, that we are absolutely firm and we've got the belts and braces on it, and so that we can stand firm in our decision, whatever that may be. I hope that's a reasonable.
At this moment, you have withdrawn your,
Yes.
your amendment. At this moment, we have a motion on the floor moved by you, Councillor Crone, that we receive the memorandum. To defer? So we have to vote on a motion to defer this matter. Moved by Councillor Johns. Any discussion on the motion? It's being, I'm assuming that you're trying to refer it back to staff, Councillor Johns, rather than deferring it, is just.
Isn't debatable, so that's why I called it.
Okay. All right, no debatable. All those in favor?
Clarification?
Go ahead.
Through you to the clerk, I'm wondering about if deferral needs a timeline on it, and if we are following the rules by just simply deferring.
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair, in accordance with the procedure bylaw, a motion to defer and any amendment to it is debatable and shall include the time or period in which consideration of the matter is to be deferred and whatever explanation is necessary to demonstrate the purpose of the motion to defer.
Okay, so we need some flesh on the motion, please.
Okay, so my motion to defer would be to the next committee of the whole meeting to allow for staff to regroup, because clearly we heard from 4 staff members here today, and I feel that all of them said something that really wasn't rowing in the same direction, so I want to give the staff the opportunity to be able to do that, to present to us. And
Okay.
so that's my motion to defer.
Does that meet our procedural bylaw, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that
Okay.
confirms.
So we can vote on that motion to defer to the next committee of the whole to allow staff to regroup, who appear to be regrouping right now. All those in favor? That motion is carried, so the matter is deferred to the next CWC. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. I think. Next item on our agenda, I hope this one goes smoother, is a memorandum regarding, it's an introductory memo for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision for Mount Albert Village South, Phase 2, which is the southwest corner of Mount Albert Road and 9th line. Ms. Bejandi, would you like to introduce this introductory memo?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's really just for council's awareness that we have received this application, and we'll be seeing further iterations of the application as it moves forward. I'm certainly able to answer any questions that members of the committee may have.
Okay, may I have a motion to receive? Bueller, moved by Councillor Crone. Any questions on the motion? Any comments? Go ahead, Councillor Carruthers.
It's the question I always ask. Where will these people shop and get services? Is there anything within walking distance?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have not begun our technical review of the application. This is an introductory memo to advise that the application has been received.
Thank you. Then my question will be reframed to, will we be advocating for some shops and services that people could walk to from the subdivision?
Ms. Bejay.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely, and I think that as this moves forward, the timing, the new PPS is enacted, that strengthens our position with respect to complete communities, as does the as will the updated Thinking Green development standards, which will be in place before this project comes to fruition.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And there's actually a bit of history on this file. There are previous iterations of this application that were presented to a prior, I think maybe 2 councils ago, but they were subject to some restraints at the sewage treatment plant. So this may have already been built if it hadn't been for that. My comments and feedback would be for the application or the applicant to consider the valley and the connectivity between the 2 sort of neighborhoods with that, obviously challenging, some challenging grades, but also some pretty significant environmental spaces there. And the other thing is we get a fair amount, or at least when I served at large, I used to get a fair amount of comments and questions expressing concern about the intersection of Mount Albert Road and 9th Line. And so some consideration for road safety, perhaps even a roundabout to enhance that area might be something that we would want to consider as part of that application. So I don't know if anyone else has any comments about that. Obviously, it's very premature. Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor to receive the memorandum from Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. That is the end of our prepared agenda. Ms. Bégin, did you have anything further to add?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members of committee, anything? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're moving to item J, Parks, Recreation, Culture, with Councillor Crone in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item on the agenda today, and it is Parks and Recreation Culture Report. It's a tender award for a contract for the construction of Simcoe Trail. Can I have a mover for this before we get going? Moved by Councillor Roy-DiClemente. Mr. Carmazin, can you fill us in on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report prepared for Council recommends Council award of a construction contract to construct the Simcoe Trail connection. Staff are pleased to report the project tender is well within the Council-approved budget. Staff would also like to highlight that the project's development charge eligible with no funding required from the tax base for the design and the construction of this long-awaited trail extension from the recently redeveloped Emily Park to the trailhead at Colony Trail and Stone Mill Boulevard. With award of the construction contract, staff would endeavor to commence the construction over the winter months with completion of the project anticipated for the spring of 2026. Staff's available to answer any questions related to the award of contract report for Council.
Thank you, Mr. Carmazin. Do we have any questions from committee? Councillor Leahy.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm asking a question on behalf of a resident who was curious as to why it is so expensive to construct trails. It's $1.329 million. And so I'm hoping that the staff could provide some information in terms of the types of finishing on the trails and the options for finishing on the trails and what the anticipated maintenance costs will be in the future.
Mr. Carmazin?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this particular trail extension has significant boardwalk due to low-lying valley lands. It was an approved design with the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. That type of trail construction does come at an elevated cost. Any capital repair and replacement costs would be included with our asset management program for regular life cycle forecasting and asset replacement with each capital budget year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for this long-awaited project, connecting up the bridge to nowhere to somewhere, and congratulate you on bringing this in below budget. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Foster.
Thank you. I'll just add to that the amount of consultation that was done with the residents was fabulous on our staff's part. This was a I'll not say a contentious issue, but there were lots and lots of questions about the different things, and staff was able to work with the residents, so that one worked out very well. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, I will call for the vote that we approve the low bid received from Melfer Construction in the amount of $1,329,000. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is approved. Mr. Karmazin, do you have anything else that you'd like to share with committee?
Through you, Mr. Chair, nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does committee have anything for Mr. Karmazin? Seeing none, I will pass it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are on item K, Legal and Legislative Services, with myself in the chair. I'd like to refer to the municipal clerk to provide an overview.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. The first report that's before you is the selection of voting method and a joint procurement opportunity with the City of Vaughan. As Council is aware, based on the 2022 election update presentation that was provided back in 2023, election planning typically begins 18 to 24 months in advance of the actual event. Securing confirmation of voting method is essential as it enables staff to proactively develop detailed operational plan, allocate resources effectively, organize staff training, and carry out voter education. It also ensures that the municipality can adapt to new technologies and voter preferences. For the 2022 municipal election, following an extensive public outreach campaign on voting preferences, online voting was introduced during advanced voting period as an alternative method of voting, and tabulators were used as vote counting equipment to count paper ballots. A total of 6,408 people voted in the 2022 election, out of which 47% of those voted online during the advanced voting period. At this time, staff is recommending that Council authorize the use of online voting. This will enable the town to participate in a joint procurement process that is being led by the City of Vaughan to select an online voting vendor for the 2026 election. This is an amazing opportunity for many of the participating municipalities in York Region. This collaboration, similar to the one that we were part of in 2022 with the town of Georgina, could provide several benefits such as competitive pricing, broader vendor options, and regional consistency regarding online voting. The draft bylaw attached to the report would also authorize the use of vote tabulators, and in line with neighboring municipalities, would apply not only to the 2020 election, but also to future elections and by-elections. The timely approval is crucial for staff to initiate procurement and conduct the necessary planning well in advance of the upcoming events. Staff will continue to report back to Council on various aspects of the upcoming 2020 election throughout 2025 and 2026. Madam Mayor, that concludes the overall update on this report. I'm happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
Thank you very much. Do I have a mover for this item? Thank you. Councillor Carruthers. Are there questions? Councillor LaHaye, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. So in 2022, I experienced the election and the campaigning and the voting firsthand, and I wanted it to be noted that I believe that the original purpose of online voting was to hopefully encourage a higher percentage of voter turnout, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. There was still a low level of voter turnout despite introducing online voting. And my experience was that I spoke with multiple individuals throughout my ward of Ward 3 who stated that they had received more than one ballot envelope with more than one code, and that deceased people received envelopes, at least 16 in one seniors residence alone that I'm aware of, and that there were individuals who were receiving multiple envelopes according to maiden names, married names, but also men who received multiple envelopes in the same name. So my question, because of my concern for the integrity of the online voting system, is it possible that people voted more than once in the 2022 election?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Okay.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Leahy. I am not aware of any contravention or corrupt practices that took place in the 2022 election. With respect to the voter notification cards that were distributed, it is important to note that the next memo that we have on the agenda today reflects some updates with respect to the voters list and the quality of the voters list that was provided to the town. And that used to be the responsibility of the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, which is known as MPACT. We have done, and this is not limited to just online voting. Any individual would have potentially received a separate envelope if they intended to vote in person. The issue that we've experienced collectively in Ontario is that there are a number of issues that were presented through the voters list that was provided by MPAC. That has since been changed, and the position has been that Elections Ontario is going to be taking lead on that. So the next update will reflect that the voters list will be provided by the province. So we are hopeful that we will be provided with more up-to-date voters list, and we can continue to ensure that individuals that have been deceased or declared deceased are removed from the list more frequently. Again, I am not aware of any issues surrounding that. Duplications were removed in our systems with the best of our abilities that we had. And I would caution council with respect to any issues surrounding this because, again, I am not aware of any police investigations that took place to result in a corrupt practice under Section 89 of the Municipal Elections Act.
Other questions, comments? Councillor Carruthers, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for this report. When we originally looked at this during the last term of council, I had a lot of concerns about it, but the tabulators, internet voting seemed to go really well. And I know probably part because of some of the concerns I had, we had this just as the advance polls. So it turned out that the only issue with the online voting was that it wasn't available on election day. And that was because of what we had agreed to here. So I'm just want to make sure that that for next year we will, or for next election, we will have internet voting on election day. And I'm not 100% sure if that's part of this report or if that's a question we'll be asking later.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Again, I appreciate that we're very enthusiastic about the method of voting. This is the initial step for us to go out to the market. The opportunity is excellent because it allows us to join forces with the City of Vaughan on the procurement opportunities. But as many may recall, it's really dependent on vendor availability. So what we're trying to do is allow for some flexibility to ensure that the methods are at a bare minimum approved so that it allows us to start the proactive planning on going through the RFP process and the procurement activities to confirm what options we're able to provide for the 2026 election. And again, you're correct, we will be providing additional updates in 2025 and 2026.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Do I have a mover this time? Councillor Carruthers, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Yes, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the second item is the Legal and Legislative Services memo with respect to the transition of the municipal voters list to Elections Ontario. The purpose of this memorandum is to update you on the transition of the municipal voters list from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, also known as MPAC, to Elections Ontario, and to outline our next steps ahead of the 2026 election. This is a really good news story as we have been advocating for this transition for a very long time. Effective January 1st of this year, MPAC's responsibility for maintaining the voters list has shifted to Elections Ontario. Residents can now update their information on their website, on the website that's provided through the Elections Ontario, which is www.registertovoteon.ca. Looking ahead, Elections Ontario has introduced an election portal for maintaining an up-to-date list of eligible electors, and staff will be trained to use these tools effectively to ensure regular updates throughout the term of council. These responsibilities will be managed by the Access and Elections Analyst, which is a proposed contract position that will be included in the Legal and Legislative Services 2025 budget request for council's consideration.
Additionally, clerk staff would work with communications to update the town's public-facing platforms to inform residents about confirming, updating, or adding their information to the election portal. That concludes the update, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments? We have Councillor Crone. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to our clerk. This is good news. I think it will give us a really fresh list. There is one question I have, though, regarding, I know there's, under the municipal elections, people who own property within a municipality can vote, even though in that municipality, even though they don't live in that municipality. Will this new list provide for that as well?
Through you, Madam Mayor, perhaps Councillor Crone, would you mind clarifying what are you anticipating from the new list?
So, because the new list works off the provincial election list, and so I believe you can only vote in one provincial riding of your residency. But in the municipal election, you can vote where you live, but also where you own property.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the list that the Elections Ontario will be preparing for municipalities will also take into account information from the Ministry of Transportation that would detail a little bit more in terms of the ownership of properties and identifying tenancies. If that is the question, we are still in the initiation phase of really learning about the election portal and going through those details. So we are happy to provide more information on that. And MPAC is going to continue to confirm these requirements for Elections Ontario, and they are still going to be holding on to the ownership of the school board elections. So they are going to be in charge of the school board activities. So there's going to be a couple of different integrations that's going to happen. And again, our intention is to proactively start to work with Elections Ontario on fully getting trained and understand all the aspects of obtaining the voters list in the best shape and form possible.
Thank you.
Councillor Lahey, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. My question is with regard to one of the new staffing items that was presented to us this afternoon, pardon me. And it's with regard to hiring an election analyst. Could you please share some more information about a full-time elections and voting analyst and why that person would need to be hired in 2025? And how long the contract would be for, et cetera?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So this position is, Councillor Lee, and thank you for the question. As I was explaining in the prior report, our election planning actually commences almost 24 months in advance of the event. Part of that would include ensuring that we have adequate staff and resourcing to help us prepare for the event. And given that there's been some changes with respect to the climate, specifically, for instance, in relation to this memo, would be the quality of the voters list. And of course, the extensive amount of access requests that we're getting. That's the third memo on today's agenda. This position will be assisting us in a couple of different fronts. One being they will be dedicated to the elections activities that will have to take place well in advance of the election. If you recall, in the 2023 update that we provided to Council, election line items exceeded 250 plus activities that we had to manage well in advance of the actual event. So that includes writing reports, preparing procedures, working through with vendors, obtaining supplies and everything of that nature. So with that in mind, proactively what we're trying to do is to ensure that this contract staff is going to be working with us throughout 2025 and well past the 2026 election, because there will be still components of the 2026 elections that would have to be configured at the beginning of 2027, which would be the financial statements that individuals have to submit. So really this resource is going to be assisting us with all of those key work that we have to do between now and the end of the election event itself.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions. I have a resolution. Be it resolved that the Legal and Legislative Services Memorandum dated October 22nd, 2024, entitled Transition of Municipal Voters List to Elections Ontario be received. Could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Cole? All those in favor? And that's carried. Number 3 on our list is Legal and Legislative Services Memo, Access and Privacy Updates.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this memo is to update Council on the access and privacy functional structure within the Legislative Services branch and to provide you with an overview of the Legislative Annual Statistical Report that was submitted to the Information Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. Access and Privacy Services is dedicated to safeguarding personal information of residents while ensuring their rights to access municipal records. This area is currently supported by 2 contract staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, also known as MFIPA, mandates the protection of individual privacy and grants residents the right to access information. Recent amendments have significantly increased municipal obligations, which require strong safeguards for records and establishing penalties for noncompliance. A recent analysis of information requests over the past 5 years has identified several noteworthy trends, which is reflected in the memo. The town's population has increased by 16% from 2019 to 2023. During this period, the number of information requests rose by 47%. The first half of 2024 has already seen a 28% increase in requests compared to those of prior years. The complexities of these requests are growing. Since 2022, 8 IPC appeals have been filed with the Information Privacy Commissioner regarding the decisions of the town, 3 of which are still remaining active. Just to give a bit of a context, 1 active appeal file has required over 115 hours of staff time to address, illustrating the significant requirement for resources involved to be able to manage and work through with the IPC. In light of these developments, proactive planning and resource allocation are necessary, and as part of the 2025 budget requests, confirmation of resources will be sought to ensure that we have adequate support within this legislatively driven area. Moving forward, staff are going to enhance the processing of FOI requests and our training programs. We're also going to be initiating development of new policies related to records management, privacy, and routine disclosure so that we can better streamline access to information for our residents. Madam Mayor, that concludes the overview of this memo. I'm happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
Thank you. Could I have a mover? Councillor Roy-DiClemente, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was happy to move it. I did have a question. The appeals to the IPC, if I cast my mind back, in the past, staff have come to us, this far predates you, Madam Clerk, but in the past, staff have come to us and said that there had been an FOI, that there had been an appeal to the Commissioner, and staff, this was in closed session, and staff requested direction to say, this is the context, should we continue to stand behind the appeal, or do we release the information? And it seems to me, I was a bit dismayed to learn that we still had 3 outstanding and that there had been so much staff time allocated to it. Obviously, I don't know the context or the content of that appeal, but in the past, as a council, we were given the opportunity to either release information or direct staff about whether or not we wanted them to continue down that road. So obviously we can't disclose that information here, but I just wondered why we hadn't known about this sooner so that we could say, no, stop fighting, release it.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Roy-DiClemente, it is a rather complex issue. One thing that I always go back to is the responsibility of the head of the organization, and one of which is to defend the decisions during the Information Privacy Commission appeals. With respect to East Gwillimbury, those responsibilities were delegated to the municipal clerk in 1992. Having gone through some background information and having the staff resources actually to help us out with these trend analysis, we have done quite an extensive amount of work to better understand the complex climate that we're faced with. Typically, we would bring forward critical appeals. What I can tell you is that of those 8 appeals, 5 were actually resolved in mediation. So they did not proceed with adjudication, but right now we're dealing with 3 active appeals that are in adjudication.
If council wishes to receive additional information, I believe those are items that we can supply in the future, but at this time, this is the only update that I have with respect to perhaps some of the explanations around the success we had in mediation for those prior appeals.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, it just seems to me that if we've been wasting 115 hours of staff time working on this, not wasting, but working on this, spending that kind of time, that we should have, had an understanding of that, and perhaps council could have said, yes, that is a valid need for us to continue to uphold, or let's move forward. It seems to me that the province is also spending a lot of effort on this. And I guess secondly, my point's made about the IPC, but secondly, I guess what I was trying to understand is whether there are trends and themes that are coming through in those FOI requests. Is there something that we're not providing as a matter of routine to our residents through open government, through our website, through our council agendas, or if there's something that we're not doing that's requiring people to file an FOI, perhaps there's another way of approaching this issue, which is to try and head these FOIs off before they even arrive at our doorstep. And I recognize that some of that may have to go into a closed session.
Through you, Madam Mayor, actually, we do have Kathleen Stennett, our Privacy Information Coordinator, here with us today. And funny enough, we had done an extensive analysis on trying to identify trends as one of the initiatives that we do want to undertake with the help of our Information and Technology Department is what can we do to further disseminate information more rapidly, of course, in compliance with MFIPA. So perhaps maybe I can ask Kathleen to join us at the lecture, and she can give council an overview of the trends that we're seeing right now in terms of the volume of information requests. One thing that I can definitely say is that we are experiencing a very different shift in some of the requests where they are becoming more voluminous and complex in nature. So Kathleen, perhaps you can give us an overview of the trends that you've identified.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that question. We've been doing some analysis, like the clerk said, on trends that we're seeing over the past 5 years in our FOI requests and just information requests as a whole. In terms of the trends that we're seeing in FOI requests, there's certainly a lot of requests for building permits, architectural drawings, things that generally come from building services. We have a very high number of requests for those. Actually, in the first half of this year, the request for permits and architectural drawings and blueprints, they went up by 40% this year compared to the first half of 2023. We're also getting a lot of requests for items such as bylaw complaint-related information. We've been seeing a lot of those. And we certainly do know that there are other municipalities that have more robust records management and routine disclosure, active dissemination tools. And as the clerk said, that's something that we're hoping to implement. We just need the time to initiate the records management policy and then move forward from there.
Councillor Roy-DiClemente, Councillor Lay, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Madam Mayor. So my question is within regard to the interviews that we had as council members back in January of 2023. I had mine with the town clerk and the town solicitor to give input into the updating of our bylaws and procedures, which haven't been updated in many, many years. And so we're fast approaching 2 years ago that took place. And I'm wondering when we will receive those updates in procedures, and when we receive it, if that would help alleviate some of these requests or challenges that the clerk's department is facing with regard to freedom of information.
I think our solicitor might have an answer for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To put some perspective on the discussions that we've been having on the FOIs and whether or not our records management is robust or needs some more robust work towards it. The litigious nature of some of these files gives rise to the amount of hours that staff, including myself, are having to devote, because there is no leniency in the legislation that confronts a municipality in terms of the timelines to respond to the myriad repetitive and redundant and sometimes ridiculous requests that we are being put through this process. It's a chronic problem that municipalities are facing in terms of addressing resources to actually deal with the requests. So I don't want to convey the impression that we can fix the problem simply with the records management work that will be underway and the staff time that has already been devoted to these endeavors. It's a point of frustration. We are working on it, but we cannot provide a happy response at this point in time. I think this would, I think, in my view, give rise to having a suggestion that we have an in-camera workshop on what this municipality has been facing through this process that is supposed to provide disclosure of information to the public who request it. However, it's gone well beyond that when we're talking about the things that we've seen. And staff have done their best to address it, but I'd like to give you a broader perspective on how this is a difficult area to resource and to respond to in a proper and a timely manner, because there are short time frames and they're not very flexible in terms of giving us flexibility to respond to them.
Mr. Velchik, did you have a comment or an answer?
Madam Mayor, I don't have anything to add. I think the town solicitor is indicating that it might be beneficial at a future date to have an in-camera education update on this matter, and we'd be happy to facilitate that.
Go ahead, please.
I'd like to move an amendment to my motion that we direct staff to coordinate an in-camera workshop for us to learn more about this important process.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second that. Not that we second it in the committee, but I think that it is worthwhile. The fact of the matter is, these requests cost money, and it's not cost recoverable either. What is it, $5, $10, $15 that we charge? It's certainly not commensurate of the time of staff that's put into it. And I think the public needs to know. I think we should be very clear about that there is a cost that is costing them, all of us as taxpayers, with this process that we're, as our town solicitor has stated, we are handcuffed by the very strict legislative requirements. I'd be curious to know, I direct this question to either the clerk or town solicitor. The comment was made that there are some of these that are of a ridiculous nature. Would you hazard a guess of a percentage of how many are ridiculous, and how much are we truly wasting taxpayers' dollars on?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I can provide more details in the in-camera session to give you some sense of how these things run the gamut. Some are very worthwhile and they're bona fide. Some are at the other end of the spectrum.
We've been discussing having another session And I'm wondering if people are interested in a private session that we could work with the clerk and find a date that would work. If I just get the nods, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then I'll leave that and have our staff coordinate it.
Madam Mayor, I put a motion on the floor to that effect.
Thank you.
So if
All
you wanna
those in
just-
favor? And that's unanimous, thank you.
And then I think I also moved receipt of the memorandum.
Yes,
so if
thank
we
you
can do
very
that.
much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that concludes all the prepared items under this particular section of the agenda.
Point of order, we need a vote on that.
Yes.
Apologies. You do need a vote for the receipt.
Yes. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And we are down to item L, Engineering and Public Works with Councillor LaHaye in the chair. Councillor LaHaye is in the chair for this next Engineering and Public Works. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Mayor. So we have two items on the agenda today, and we have Director Newman filling in for General Manager Molinari. And the first one is with regard to the Yonge Street revitalization update for Holland Landing. Director Newman, would you like to fill us in?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. I'd like to highlight in this report to Council that once we started this project, we shortly after that partnered with the region. The region has looked into and will be expanding on replacing the water main in this section of the revitalization area. That represents two large increases to our project budget. Just for Council's information, that dollar value will be 100% recouped from the region at no cost to the town. Also, I'd like to point out that the staff are requesting Town Council to request York Region to approve the installation of traffic signals at the intersection of Yonge Street and Doan Road in advance of meeting warrants. And also, we hope to enlist some work of this project starting this fall with utility relocation. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council members? Yes, Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you, and thank you to staff for this. This is a really good news story because of what is being done by the region to make our stormwater filtered before it goes into the river. So I think that this is something that we can maybe do a communication piece on to let taxpayers know that and let residents know that Yonge Street revitalization is being slightly delayed, but there's a real positive outcome of this, that we will have that better quality storm sewer system in place and help protect our important watershed. So I'm hoping that we can add that to our to-do list, to some communication around that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other councillors who have questions? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a suggestion. I've spoken about this to some staff before. Actually, we talked about the signalization of the Yonge and Doan Road area. That still is a very aggressive curve there. The visibility is not great. I'm wondering if there should be an extra ask in the part about the advancing to put signals there. Is there a possibility that there could be a flashing red light further to the south that indicates that you are coming up to a red light intersection only when it's red? My thought process is, as you're heading north and you come to that intersection, you cannot see it very well. We know they like to go a little faster than they're supposed to there. I'm just wondering if there's an advance notice type of light of some sort that could be put further back in the middle of the curve kind of thing. Just a suggestion.
Thank you very much. you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Foster. We will follow up with the region and request.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions with regard to the Yonge Street revitalization update? I believe did I forget to get a mover for this, or I need to get a mover? Okay. Councillor Foster, yes, you moved this. And so seeing no other questions, can we have a vote on this? All those in favor of receiving the update? Very good. And it is moved. And so item number 2 is the Engineering and Public Works memo with regard to the Mount Albert Downtown Revitalization Update. And again, over to you, Director Newman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, I'll be very brief. We've got some good news we've received this week. We've been working diligently with this project. We were anticipating starting utility location, having it underway by now. We were informed this week that the utility relocation is imminent, so the residents will be starting to see some action, hopefully by the end of this month, early, and if not, early in November. With the main part of the construction of this project to occur next year, with completion in 2026. We have been not having a lot of communication with the public to date because we've been mostly working behind the scenes. Now that there's going to be some active construction, things starting to move forward, we will be working with communications to have a very regular communication plan so the residents and businesses are well informed of the activity ongoing. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that update, and it's great news. I know all of our residents will be excited, and that tops the frequently asked question. The most frequently asked question is, when is it going to start? So I'd like to open it up to my fellow councillors here. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to move this. Mr. Newman, perhaps you could, you mentioned about the relocates on the utilities. Can you estimate? I know their timeline isn't always our timeline. Are you able to estimate how much time that cost us trying to get them all on board? How much time did we lose by trying to coax them along?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure that we lost time, but certainly it is time consuming. We have worked very closely with both Rogers and Ontario Hydro, and I would say that both of them have worked very responsibly with us, and in partnership, we're finally at a position where the project is going to see construction.
Well, I know, as my colleague said earlier, we get asked about it quite a lot. What form do you anticipate the communication taking? Is it going to be social media? Is it what's your attack?
I will answer that through you, Madam Chair. As with any large-scale project like this, there's a comprehensive communication strategy that's developed. It involves a number of channels, including social media, our website. We have our e-news that goes out weekly. We have signage in our centers. We have electronic signs outside. So what is geographically and locally appropriate for the news and the audience, we will endeavor to undertake those efforts.
Are there any other questions for Director Newman? Seeing none, I just wanted to make a comment about the completion date, and it's my understanding that there is a completion date of October of 2026, and that we are on track to meet that completion date. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And seeing no other questions of council members, I'd like to take a vote on, this has been moved by Councillor Crone, a vote to receive this update on the Mount Albert Downtown Revitalization. All in favor? Very good. Thank you very much. And I had one final question before we wrap up the Engineering and Public Works Department. I was wondering if you had an update. We had discussed it in September about the population increase and that the signs were going to be replaced by York Region this fall. And so we're fast approaching the end of October, and I'm wondering if we have an update from York Region when those are going to be installed.
To you, Madam Chair, we do not have that information yet, but we will once again follow up with York Region and get back to you.
Thank you very much. And if you don't have any other further comments to make, then we will pass the chair back to Mayor Hackson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have no items listed for item M, N, O, and P for other business.
Oh, Madam Mayor?
Yes,
I do have a question under other business.
we will go to item P then. Go ahead.
So very, very good. So item P is other business. So yesterday, the councillors received an internal memo about the Howard House fire. And so my question is.
Point
is
of
there-
order.
No, excuse me. My question is this. You
Point
don't
of
know my
order, Madam
question
Mayor.
yet.
Thank you.
You don't know my question yet.
Just wait, please.
I believe if there is an additional item for the agenda, we need to have a vote of council to allow it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct. It would require a special majority vote to introduce a new item.
So through you, Madam Mayor, I would like to ask that we have a vote. I have one high-level question with regard to the memo that councillors received yesterday and the Howard House fire.
Councillor Roy-DiClemente, go ahead, please.
It's my understanding that that memorandum was confidential and for their internal use only. I'm not sure it's appropriate to raise it here in the open session.
Well, that was my question. Is there any reason why it cannot be shared with the public? That's my question.
If it was not given to us to, sorry, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, it was a briefing note, to be specific, not necessarily marked confidential, but intended as an information update for council members and simply to advise councils in that briefing note what some immediate next steps were that were going to take place, and that further information and discussion would take place if and as appropriate subsequent to those next steps.
And through you, Madam Chair, that is why I was asking, under other business, my only question, it was not with regard to go into the details of the memo, which was not confidential, but which was internal, is there any reason why that memo can't be shared with the public who are asking questions?
There's a motion on the floor from the point of order, I believe.
Yes.
So can we call,
We need to have a vote to proceed. Do we have a motion to proceed?
I would like to put forward a motion that I am allowed to ask that question and that staff answer the question that I have asked.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That will not be dealt with this evening. Thank you. We are down to other business. There is none at this time. We will have an adjournment at 4:57. Could I have a mover and a Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. We adjourn.